Hi, welcome for another Ask a Historian. My name is Justine Lyn, Resource Center Assistant here with Heritage Mississauga. And before we start, I just wanted to encourage everyone to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date on all the heritage happenings here with Heritage Mississauga. And today I would like to introduce Matthew Wilkinson, our guest. Normally he's the host, but today he's the guest. He's our historian here with Heritage Mississauga, and we're just going to discuss the upcoming Haunted Mississauga event. So thank you for being with us, Matthew. And I just wanted to ask you about, what is Haunted Mississauga for those who don't know what it is?
Well, it's kind of neat, switching hats and being on the other end of the interview. So, but thank you for doing this. I think last year's event I interviewed you for Haunted. So Haunted Mississauga is it's in its 21st year, but we're back to in person after a couple of years of doing different virtual programs. And Justine was headed up last year's program. But the 21st year, we're back to a familiar place for us. We're returning to in-person tours at the Streetsville Memorial Cemetery on Queen Street in Streetsville. But Haunted Mississauga, its name evokes perhaps an idea that it's all about ghost stories, and really it's about bringing history to life. We have tours that are featuring in-person character actors representing people from our past, and they theme the tours around a particular event from our history, and we explore the people and moment from that time in the course of our tour. So it's quite unique. It happens on one night only each year, irregardless of weather. And yes, believe me, we've had all kinds of weather. In fact, the story that we're bringing to life this year is a redo, if you will, from an event in 2009, and which was probably our worst ever weather event for Haunted Mississauga. So not many people got to see that story way back when. So with a few tweaks, it's back this year, and it's our evening is themed on an election, a by-election that happened in 1832, and so Streetsville was part specific to that had many local connections to that moment in time, including Timothy Street, after whom Streetsville is named, who ran in that election. Anyway, the event itself, Haunted Mississauga, the 21st annual Haunted Mississauga, and I shake my head when I say 21st annual because that's incredible. 21st annual Haunted Mississauga takes place on Saturday, October 22nd in Streetsville Memorial Cemetery in 299 Queen Street South in Streetsville.
So for those people who are just walking up and have never experienced this event, what could they expect to, see or do during the evening?
One of my favorite quotes that I've ever had from Haunted was, "This is the way the history should be taught." If you come to the tour, and please, we encourage anyone to come out, to connect with us, or pre-order tickets, show up on the night of, come along for a tour. It is unscripted historical theater with improvisation, actors, a lot of humor, of course respectfully done in the individuals who are portraying people from their past. But on the evening, there are tours every 20 minutes. Each tour lasts about 45 minutes. And if you went on every single tour, you would have a different experience on every single tour. I can promise you that, because the actors move around and they interact with each other, and it's unscripted. What we do is we give the actors a historically accurate bio of an individual who is either buried in that cemetery or is connected to the story that we're telling. And then the actors bring that person to life as best they can, along with the background story of the election and the issues that were involved in the election. And they tell a story through the interaction of the actors, not only with the audience and the tour guides, but also with each other. And so you've got factions kind of pitted against each other. You'll have actors who are trying to sway the vote one way or another. And it ends up being just a fascinating exploration of local history brought to life by an incredibly passionate, what we refer to as our spirit team, but an incredibly passionate crew of volunteer actors and tour guides. And again, one night only. It's just a fun way to connect with history. improvisation, unscripted, historical theater. So it's not despite the name Haunted Mississauga, it's not a ghost story evening, although we will share a few ghost stories, but it really is more about bringing history to life, and then interacting with it. If you get it, what's the old line? We want you to have a history education without knowing you're having one. And really, Haunted is a phenomenal vehicle in which to engage with local history, but have fun at the same time, and really partake in the story of our past that brought to life by our crew of actors and tour guides.
So, I mean, obviously, there's going to be a lot of actors playing historical characters. So, who are some of the interesting people that maybe we could meet on the tour?
Well, you've got so what we've done is create a cast of characters, if you will, with our volunteer crew of actors. Some of the people from our past include Streetsville's first doctor, Dr. John Crombie, and kind of he was a leading citizen of his day. He was in 1832, when our story takes place, he was newly arrived in the Streetsville community, but he's an educated man, and certainly would have been partaking in the political conversations of the day. We also have a representative of our first settling family in the Streetsville area, and that is the Glendinnings, and Margaret Glendinning will be portrayed here, and that was a very pro-conservative family, because there is a legacy of kind of their voting history and how they were involved in local politics. We'll also be bringing the prominent Askin family. Isaac and Jane Askin will be part of our story. They were staunch supporters, again, of the Conservative Party and of Timothy Street. And speaking of Timothy Street, we will have someone who has played Timothy Street many times in the past, reprising that role on the evening, and Timothy Street being the Conservative candidate in the election. But from the Reform side, we had members of the Steen and Sibbald family were noted reformers, as was James Patterson, who was the Laird of Bonnie Braes, a Scottish immigrant to the Streetsville area, very prominent in local politics and in the Presbyterian Church. And we'll also be throwing into the mix, bound to have a little bit of chaos therein, Henry Cole, who was a prominent member of the much maligned Townline Blazers, who were Orangemen, very conservative and anti-reform, to the point of sometimes partaking in nefarious actions to put down the Reform Party and the reform movements of the time. So he'll be part of our story, no doubt, to try and sway some of the vote, and kind of perhaps not to the conservative side, but certainly away from the reform side, if you will. So there'll be all kinds of kind of theatrics, and again, it's unscripted. So even as somebody who's put together an evening, you're never really sure how it's going to involve once the actors get going with the characters and start moving around the cemetery. So it's again, highly encourage you to come out, and I'll have a few surprises thrown in as well, in terms of just actors who will wander about and in some ways try to trip up the other actors as they go. They always have fun doing that, but really partaking in kind of the characters and the story of the times. One of the neat things is as I mentioned, our story is based really on something that actually happened, and we have a great deal of information around that. A couple of resources around that I'll highly recommend: Life and Times of William Lyon Mackenzie, written by his son-in-law Charles Lindsay, refers to kind of the tumultuous years between 1832 and 1834, which really led the way to the rebellion of 1837, and that had to do with William Lyon Mackenzie, the outspoken reform critic of the Legislative Council, repeatedly getting elected, but then repeatedly getting booted out of the Legislative Council. And so one of the issues at hand is, of course, secret balloting versus an open public vote, which is what they were doing at the time, but also that elected representation, where if you're we're coming into a municipal election here, say you voted for your candidate, but then in the first meeting of council they went, no, we don't like you, out. And that's, that not only did that happen once with Mackenzie, it happened 4 times. And so and 2 of those times Mackenzie ran unopposed and was reelected by his constituents, only to be turfed out of legislative council again. And so that's the story here. So what had happened leading up to our story this year. So our story is set on New Year's Day of 1832, and it's a by-election because Mackenzie has been booted out of the legislature the previous fall. So a by-election is held. Timothy Street is appointed the challenger, if you will, for the Conservative Party, and William Lyon Mackenzie is re-upped as the Reform candidate, and so the election will take place the day after our story. So January 2nd, 1832 is when the election took place. Our story is set the day before, as the candidates are trying to drum up support for themselves. So the election took place in Toronto at a hotel known as the Red Lion Inn, and 40 sleighfuls of people. Is that the right word? Sleighfuls. 40 sleighs of people from historic Peel County descended on the Red Lion Inn. Over 2,000 people gathered there to hear the candidates speak and to vote. We won't tell you the outcome because, well, it's an interesting part of our history as well. You'll have to come to Haunted to find out the outcome. But in another book here by Mary Manning on the man, the family, the village, Street, on the Street family in Streetsville, describes the occasion of Timothy Street's foray into politics. The morning was clear and pleasant, the weather mild and agreeable, and the sleighing excellent. By 10 o'clock, the farmers were assembled in great numbers around the hustings. Now, hustings are the way they used to have to vote. They used to have to walk up a small platform as a voting electorate, stand on that platform, and declare openly who they were voting for in public. To vote, you had to be male, you had to be 19 years of age, and you had to own property. And so that was, it narrowed the voting field somewhat considerably, but over 2,000 people did gather to vote at the time. So by 10 o'clock, the farmers had assembled in great numbers around the hustings, and soon afterwards, the Young Street triumphal car carrying the ensign of the United Kingdom with several Highland pipers passed down towards the town, followed by farmers and sleighs. 40 sleighs came down into York and escorted their champion to the polls. It was generally believed that Colonel Washburn would stand up against Mackenzie, but he withdrew his name and gave his support to Mr. Street, and that is Timothy Street, who was introduced to the electors by Colonel E.W. Thompson. Mr. Mackenzie was proposed for his third candidature by Joseph Shepherd of York and seconded by Jogart of Whitechurch. Mackenzie made a speech, and the names of the candidates were submitted. A forest of hands went up when Mackenzie's name was proposed, and the polls opened at 1:20 in the afternoon that day, and then the rest will become part of the history of our story. But we do know that it happened, and we do know the outcome of it, and we'll be exploring those stories at Haunted Mississauga this year.
Fascinating stuff. Lots to look forward to and speculate about, maybe.
Right.
So I know that you mentioned briefly this a bit earlier, but just to go back in case people missed it, when and where does the tour take place again?
So again, one night only. If you miss it, you miss it. The actors are only in costume in the cemetery for one evening. So it is Saturday evening, October 22nd. Tours start at 7 o'clock in the evening. So we're going to be in the dark in the cemetery. What better way to mark the coming Halloween? So tours are at 7, 7:20, 7:40, 8 o'clock, 8:20, 8:40, and 9 o'clock. There's an Eventbrite link here to pre-order your tickets and select your times. There is very limited space, and so when it's full, it's full. But you can also walk up to the event as well, and we'll do our best to accommodate you therein. So again, it's at Streetsville Memorial Cemetery, Saturday, October 22nd, and the cemetery is located at 299 Queen Street South in Streetsville. There's also limited parking, so give yourself a little bit of ample time to find parking within the village. Again, we're at a cemetery, and you will see us there set up right on Queen Street in the historic cemetery. I should mention we didn't really talk about the cemetery itself. The cemetery is fascinating as well, and yes, we are doing a tour of the cemetery with tour guides, but you may want to check out the cemetery as well. It's truly a testament to our early history here in Mississauga. The cemetery was established in 1824 from a gift of land to the Protestant denominations of Streetsville by Timothy Street himself. And so in 1824, the cemetery is established. April of 1824 was his first burial. There is estimated to be over 500 burials in the cemetery, of which 293 are recognized on known markers within the cemetery today, so gravestones. The cemetery was closed in 1890, and at one point known as the Scotch Burying Ground. I always find that name fascinating. Was later rededicated as Memorial Park Cemetery, and today we refer to it as the Streetsville Memorial Cemetery. And Timothy Street himself passed away in 1848, and he is buried in the cemetery as well. But the majority of the people that you'll meet on our tours, portrayed by our actors, are also buried in that cemetery. And we do our best to kind of highlight the life and times of the people who helped shape the land before us. And the cemetery is a wonderful place to interact and reflect on the passage of time. And so again, if you're interested in a tour of the cemetery, you can do that at any time. But if you want to partake in Haunted Mississauga and have a guided tour with the actors, and that is on October 22nd, will take place. So.
Yeah, so I mean, and lots of ways to learn about history there at the cemetery. But yeah, so that's it. We will leave it here. Mark your calendars, everyone, for Haunted Mississauga 2022. Get ready. And yeah, and so just thank you so much, Matthew, for being with us today. And of course, once again, I would encourage everyone to like, comment, and subscribe here on our video, and stay tuned for the next Ask a Historian. Thank you so much.